One afternoon this spring, my phone was ringing just as I put my key in the door. Now, for a lot of people, that's not a meaningful thing anymore, but I'm one of the few people left who still primarily use my landline. Now, I'm going to just say there are lots of advantages to being behind the times in this way, but I will save that wisdom for another day. My phone talks to me. It's got this little voice, like when my mother used to call it, would say, "Call from Deo, Josephine." So it was talking to me, so I knew that it was my old friend Tim. It was an odd time of day for him to be calling. Tim is a friend with whom I have always had regular contact ever since college. But for the past 30 years, he had always called me on weekends or in the evening. I had never gotten a call at 4 o'clock on a weekday before. So I was a little concerned that something might be wrong, and I rushed to get the phone. "Hey there," Tim greeted me, kind of matter-of-factly. "How are you?" Well, I was a bit out of breath from rushing. "I'm good," I said. I'm just getting in from work." "Oh, that's right," Tim replied. "Sorry, I lose track since I retired." Retired? For some reason, the word hit me strangely. How could the boy whose dorm room I used to lie around in watching Hill Street Blues be retired? I mean, it does not seem that long ago that he was arguing with his parents about switching his major from pre-med to business. It doesn't seem too long ago that I was supporting him through his first breakup and he was working up the courage to get his ear pierced. And now he's retired? It wasn't that I was surprised exactly. Tim has always been a man with a plan. Our group of friends back in college used to tease him that he was born 40 years old. At 19, he was already clipping coupons for TV dinners, mailing in rebates for soap and toothpaste and batteries, and using his birthday money to buy shares of stock. As early as freshman year, he had a list of financial goals. Buy a brand new car with cash by the time he graduated, buy his first house by the time he was 25, and retire by age 55. And, I must say, he had been faithful to the list. While I was still driving my grandparents' rusty, hand-me-down 72 Dodge Dart, Tim bought a brand new Honda Accord and drove it to graduation. While I was still living above a pizza place with 3 roommates and sleeping in a borrowed twin bed in Buffalo, Tim purchased a brand new 2-bedroom condominium in Atlanta, in one of the suburbs, and furnished the entire thing with brand new furniture. All of it, by the way, black, white, and gray. He moved in the week of his 26th birthday. Tim had lots of other goals too. He wanted to pay off his mortgage by the time he was 35. He wanted to have $1 million in his IRA by the time he was 50. And he wanted to retire at the latest by the time he was 55. And he had kept me apprised of his progress on all of these goals over the years. So I knew that he was meeting them roughly on the schedule that he had laid out for me one night when we were 19 and we were lying by Owasco Lake looking up at the stars. Like all of his other goals, his retirement happened more or less on schedule, coming just after his 56th birthday. And as much as Tim was enjoying retirement himself, and enjoying it just for and of itself, I could also tell that he was getting just as much satisfaction from having accomplished the goal, and having reached the finish line, and having arrived at security. "My mortgage is long paid off," he said. "I've met my investment goals, and I have left behind the stress of work forever." It's so nice, he said, to have the struggle behind me. I have arrived at security, he told me. Remember those rules that I told you I was taught in seminary? Well, there's another rule that I was taught that I probably haven't discussed before, but I'm going to break it this morning. In addition to the advice that we received that you should never use personal stories in sermons, and that you should never use the word sermon in a sermon, we were also advised to never admit from the pulpit that we struggled with any kind of real human frailty. It was okay, our professor said, to admit to some harmless faults like being absent-minded or having a sweet tooth. But never, he said, never admit from the pulpit that you struggle with any serious frailties like greed or envy or lust. But I'm going to break that advice this morning. And I am going to admit that that day last spring, when I spoke with Tim, and we reminisced about the days when we used to wash our darks and whites together to save quarters at the laundromat, as we reviewed his schedule of goals and marveled together at the amazingly successful record he had at meeting them, as he told me of the trips that he had planned for this coming winter, of the new things he had bought for his house, and as he described for me in quite a bit of detail the sheer and utter pleasure of being able to wake up each and every morning whenever he wanted to, as he reflected contentedly on what a good feeling it was to have all of his debts paid off and to know that he never again had to worry about such things, I was deeply, deeply envious. So envious that I had a hard time listening. So envious that I was hoping to hear some confession of boredom or unhappiness, or maybe even a little arthritis. So envious that I found myself questioning my own life choices. I am sure it already goes without saying that my life has followed a quite different trajectory from Tim's. I have not enjoyed anywhere close to the financial success or security that he has. My mortgage is still far from paid off. My bank account is meager by comparison, and I still have many, many years of work ahead. And by the way, Tim is not the only person who has been pushing these buttons of envy in me this year, by the way. You see, my cohort of teacher friends, including my former partner, are all hitting 55. They're all at retirement age, and this year I have watched many, many of them retire. But because I spent many years away from teaching as I prepared for the ministry and did a couple of other things as well, because I ended up in a brand new relationship in my 40s, and because my particular BOCES does not give retiring teachers any sort of health insurance, I have at least another decade of work ahead of me. And even when retirement comes, it is going to be a much more modest affair than Tim's is. Not only do I have a decade of work left, I have a decade of stressful, emotionally draining, and at times even physically risky work ahead. Our students are among the most challenging students that are served by the public schools. They have severe emotional and psychological challenges. They are really hard to work with. And at times, they are hard to love. They sometimes swear at us, they throw chairs, they destroy our property. Sometimes we get hit or kicked or spit at. It is a rare occurrence to ever get through a 30-minute lesson as planned. So frequent are the emotional outbursts that punctuate and shape our days. And just when it seems that a student may have mastered a skill or learned a coping mechanism or broken with a dysfunctional pattern, they will suddenly regress and revert as if the teaching had never happened, as if the progress had never been made, and as if the learning had never taken place. As a teacher in this environment, it is extremely difficult to feel any measure of success, or to hold on to any ongoing sense that you are making any sort of real difference or contributing to any meaningful or lasting student growth. Satisfaction, if it is to be found at all, is glimpsed in individual and discrete moments, ephemeral in nature, and nearly always followed just as quickly by disappointing undoing. These moments have to be mined for. They have to be sought out. They have to be savored in the moment and then let go of just as quickly as they came, because attaching any sort of expectations to them at all is to have your heart broken every hour of every day. I can honestly say, and I mean this, that there has not been a single day in 15 school years that I have not felt in some moments a sense of futility, of overwhelming frustration, and at times downright soul-robbing despair over the career that I have chosen and over the organized chaos in which I spend my days. The lack of anything which resembles the sort of linear progress that we are all programmed to seek and expect can be disheartening, discouraging, and depressing. It can rob you of your motivation, drain you of your passion, and purloin your sense of purpose. And yet, at the same time, the work continues to call me. Because just as it is very true that not a day goes by that I don't feel discouraged, dispirited, or deflated, there is also never a day that goes by that I don't at some points feel inspired and invigorated and loving and compassionate and connected and hopeful. There are moments every single day that are rewarding and meaningful and keep me coming back. The work, with its moment-to-moment volatility, its constant cycle of highs and lows, its capacity to be joyful one minute and hopeless the next, makes a kind of deep, intuitive, and spiritual sense to me that the linear progression of sales goals and promotions that marked Tim's career lacks. Life, no matter how much we are programmed to expect otherwise, is not a straightforward series of goals permanently attained and debts forever paid. In spite of what my friend Tim has been led to believe by the path his life happened to take, we never really leave behind the struggle. We never untether ourselves from ephemera, and we never arrive at security. We may reach the goals that we have set. We may attain the successes that we strive for, but these achievements do not inoculate us from the human condition. They don't make less tenuous our existence, and they do not free us from all responsibility of strife. At its deepest and most authentic nature, life is more like a BOCES special education center than it is like Citibank. Our daily experiences are much more special education teacher than they are senior financial analyst. And our lives are lived much more in discrete and ephemeral moments than they are in promotions attained and in mortgages paid. Like my days at school, each and every day of every single person's life is a mixture of highs and lows, achievements and setbacks, progress and regression. Each of us has moments every day, every single day, of hopeless futility, overwhelming frustration, and at least a few seconds of downright soul-robbing despair. We all seek and expect a certain feeling of completion and satisfaction from a linear progression of tasks completed and goals achieved that in the end proves elusive, even when we do manage to check all of the items off our lists in the order that we listed them. We all hope to reach the point where we no longer have to struggle, and we all long for a security that doesn't and actually cannot exist. This is the nature of this human life. We all have to glimpse satisfaction in individual, discrete, and ephemeral moments. We all must mine for, seek out, and savor them in the moment. And if we don't want our hearts broken, we must also learn to let go of them as quickly as they came. We have all had glorious moments followed by disappointing undoing, and we have all experienced the heartbreak of attaching too many expectations to these wonderful moments. Life is not an arc with a perfect trajectory from life to death. It is instead a chaotic string of volatile moments. It's a constant cycle of highs and lows, and each day can surprise and wound us with its perpetual capacity to be joyful one moment and hopeless the next. The promise of eternal security is seductive and elusive in equal measure. We all long for it. A part of us expects and feels entitled to it. And we all are capable of envy when we feel that someone else has attained a higher degree of it than we have. We all of us at times question our life choices, feel deep regret over missed opportunities, and long for a measure of security that we can never attain. And in many ways, I think, and I have come to believe, that the more reminders of this that are built into our daily lives, things like paying the mortgage and struggling to get a student not to throw a chair, the more we are immersed in those things, the more closely aligned we are with the authentic nature of reality and with the real truth of our lives. Being part of the struggle is being part of life itself. The closer we live to that edge, the more in tune we are with the majority of creatures who share this planet with us. To be in touch with our own vulnerability is to be connected more fully to the experience of refugees who are currently seeking asylum all over the globe. It is to be connected to the modern-day slaves found in every nation. And it is to be connected to the RAIN families who every year seek shelter in this very building. To have to put forth daily and deliberate effort to meet our needs is to live as the wild creatures do. Those wild creatures all over the earth who right now so desperately need our attention and our compassion. And to have to seek to find joy in discrete moments is to live as the terminally ill do, and the recently bereaved do, and those who are recovering from addictions do. Compassion is the mother of justice, and suffering is the seed of sympathy. My feelings after Tim's phone call unsettled me deeply. I spent the next few days reconsidering and revisiting and regretting. Choices which had long ago been made, opportunities long ago foreclosed upon, and decisions that could not be taken back all haunted me. The day after his call, as luck would have it, I arrived home to find in the mailbox that my mortgage statement had come. Tim had not had a mortgage payment since 1996. The money that he did not have to spend that way over the last 23 years had been invested and reinvested, buying him the freedom and ease that he was now enjoying. His career had been a string of successes that he could now look back on with pride and with satisfaction. Not once in his entire career had he ever been spit on. And rarely, if ever, had he had to console and sustain himself through an entire, exhausting, soul-crushing day on one or two brief moments of grace. In any event, his working life was over, and the endless freedom and permanent security lay ahead of him, just exactly like he had planned it, while my next decade would just be more of the same. Chaotic reading lessons, thrown chairs, and emotional outbursts. For the next 10 years, I will continue to get up at 6 a.m. I will drive to Shortsville through rain, road construction, and snow, and I will hope that my health doesn't fail me too soon. Most days, if not all, my heart will visit, at least fleetingly, hopelessness, futility, and despair. When my car gives out, which I think is going to be soon, I will need a bank loan. When my house needs painting, I will have to cut corners. And by the way, my mortgage will not be paid off until June 2027. My introspection about all of this, and the envy, definitely the envy, lasted a few days. A couple days after Tim's call, I remember this one morning that I set out for Shortsville with a resentment that I'd never, ever felt before. And that day, as it turns out, was an especially rocky one in my classroom, with a physical fight between two students that I had to put myself in between to break up. And a bulletin board that I had worked for over an hour on was ripped to shreds in a matter of seconds. That's one of the things they do as they're leaving the room, they the bulletin board. So I had to work especially hard that day to glimpse my moment of grace. But it came, and it came during reading group. My higher level readers that day read a news article about a homeless woman who lived on the streets of Chicago. The woman was elderly, she was African American, and she was in poor health. And yet, in the article, she said that she was grateful. I live in a rich country, and I can always find food to eat and places to rest, she said. And I give thanks to God for every meal I get, and I offer a prayer for all of those poor people around the world who have no food at all. There, but for the grace of God, go I. My hardship is God's way of keeping me humble. The message is so obvious, and the lesson is so simple, it doesn't even need to be explained, does it? Even the kids grasped it with no explanation at all. My student Dylan, who was living in a motel room with his father who was on parole at the time, said, I know how she feels. We used to sleep in my mom's friend's living room, and now we have our own room to ourselves. I feel sorry for all those homeless people. At least I have a place to live. 10 minutes later, Dylan threw a chair at the smartboard because he didn't want to transition from reading to math. But such is the rhythm of my days, of everyone's days, really. We never know what's coming, and everything can change for each and every one of us in the blink of an eye. Perhaps this day I began to think maybe I am a little bit more fortunate than people like Tim, because the circumstances of my life anchor me more firmly to the reality of impermanence and keep me grounded in the minute-to-minute volatility of our existence. Perhaps, like the monks in Asia who eat only what is put into their begging bowls, it is better for the soul to live a little closer to the edge. And by the way, I must acknowledge that I am certainly not close at all. I am an enormously privileged person by every measure, and I do understand and appreciate that. No matter who we are, no matter where we live, the mortgage is never paid. We never arrive at security, and we are never really insulated from struggle. The debts we may have, the work that we must endure even when it taxes us, and all of the other burdens that we all carry with us each and every day can, if we look at them right, serve as spiritual guideposts if we let them. Let us go forth this week looking for those burdens and trying to appreciate how they ground us to reality and how they improve our spiritual lives.